Hi, this is the 5th episode of a Tale Told by an Idiot podcast, and this time we're going to be talking about a possibly American author. He's contemporary. His name is Evan Dara, and I'm going to be talking today with Arthur. He was also in our last podcast, Hart Crane.
Yeah, the only person besides Drake who's read the book who even owns a copy.
Yeah, this author is he's not well known at all. So
very obscure.
You can be the discoverer of a new continent. All right, so since we don't really know anything about the biography or anything else, I think we should just dive into Lost Scrapbook.
The only two things we know is that even Dara is supposedly American and living in France. Although he could be living inside he could be living in any watered down town in America, in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, and it is interesting here on the Lost Scrapbook, which was published in 1995, the same year as Infinite Jest. It says on the back here, there's like a little advertising blurb from Richard Powers, and as Paperbird mentions in his YouTube channel, some people have thought that it's the same author, but that is very unlikely. But The Lost Scrapbook is his first novel he published in 1995, and it was the winner in a competition from the Fiction Collective 2, and the judge was William T. Vollman at the time. So
William T. Vollman.
And I heard of it actually from Paperbird, and I think, Arthur, did you hear it from me? Hear about the book?
Yeah, you told me. I followed your enthusiastic recommendation.
Well, maybe I'll become a salesman after this podcast. But if the podcast doesn't work out, I'm not calling anything. But
actually, that's how you found out about the book, right? Like, who's fiction? Paperbird or something. Who's that?
Yeah, Paperbird on YouTube. He made a video about all three of his books and said that it was good, and I followed his enthusiastic recommendation and bought The Lost Scrapbook. I ended up loving it. I read it so quickly. And then I went out and bought The Easy Chain and Flee, which are his second and third novel. The Easy Chain published in 2008, and Flee published in 2013. So he is really a contemporary author and still publishing as far as anyone knows. And
he could be watching this.
Yeah, maybe he'll listen to it and try to get a copyright strike or something. I don't know, but I'm just kidding.
I mean, I wrote a review of The Lost Scrapbook on Facebook, and I even got my friend to buy it.
So we basically need to be hired. That's what Arthur's getting.
We're getting even Dara needs to give us a part of the revenue.
Slice of the pie.
Yeah, we're getting him out there, and we're not even. Yeah,
we have no stake in the matter. We are nameless. We're going to be lost to history.
We're gonna be lost in a scrapbook somewhere.
In someone's yearbook. Yeah. But actually, how he has a website. Assuming it's him, it's almost definitely him. It's called an Aurora Publisher. He put out new editions of each of the three books, and that's how I
apparently Aurora has published books before. I mean, different books besides even Dara's.
Yeah, I did see that, but I don't know if they're publishing any of the other ones anymore, because if you go on the website, it just shows his books. So I'm not sure. But
do you think even Dara hijacked the publishing house?
Yeah, maybe he's like an angel investor and just bought 80% of the company and made everyone else back out. He doesn't seem like that. He seems like an upstanding citizen.
How you know, like, it could be like a persona or whatever.
Yeah,
like,
but
how do you know if there's like there's just I know some dark, obscure reason for why he doesn't want to show his face or something.
But like you think like he may be in prison and he's just getting some like nameless lawyer that he knows to publish everything under Aurora.
I mean, maybe. I don't know. It could be like, or maybe he just maybe he just hates the literary scene or something. Maybe.
Well, I think it is interesting that is really a common theme among really good authors, at least in America in the 20th century. You can think of many examples. You go to William Gaddis. He was relatively private in how he went about his literary fame. You have J.D. Salinger, who was notably reclusive. Thomas Pynchon. Also, you have Cormac McCarthy, who doesn't like to deal with any of that. So, and even the more famous one, Don DeLillo, yeah, he's done a little more stuff, but he doesn't go out of his way to do that type of thing. So,
well, it's not like the media tries to solicit them. I mean,
yeah, I know they probably get money thrown in their face, and then they just can't turn it down. But I don't know. I think it's good for them to talk, but there's definitely a tradition in America of authors not wanting anything to do with that sort of soul-sucking fame complex. That
the only one I can think of who actually showed up on video and in many different interviews was David Foster Wallace.
Yeah, now we have horrific screenshots of him making weird contortions.
Yeah, he had something.
It may not have been a good decision for him to do that, actually, yeah. These recluses may be onto something.
Yeah, like, if you, like, go and see his David Lynch interview, you can see that the guy who's talking just like, what the fuck, can you just calm down?
That is true. Every time he makes, like, some grimace, what is it, Charlie Rose is just like, all right, dude, we're not, this is not like an indictment. You are just talking about a movie maker you enjoy.
No, and for some reason he makes those weird like
dude, this is not a podcast on David Foster Wallace. We gotta get back on track, dude, okay? We're gonna get lost.
Man, it's like do you think Infinite Jest sort of eclipsed the Lost Scrapbook because they came out the same years, apparently?
Yeah, that is interesting because, I mean, I haven't read I haven't read Infinite Jest. I've only read the Lost Scrapbook, but just
you don't want to read Infinite Jest.
Yeah, I don't know. Infinite Jest is very long. The Lost Scrapbook is only 500 pages? Yeah, 460 something. And there's actually a 70-page string in the center that is blank. So you can either flip through that slowly and imagine there's words there, or go fast. But at least from like cultural knowledge, it seems that the themes in Infinite Jest are fairly similar as far as isolation and loneliness, and then trying to go for a sense of community. And then there's also quite a large focus on creativity. But you've read both. How do you think they compare to each other, or if they do at all?
Well, I think they have you may say they have the same aim, but they kind of go in different directions. Like, I would say the Lost Scrapbook is a more organic sort of novel, whereas like Infinite Jest, it's like Wallace is trying to, like, I don't know, create a whole universe, a whole galaxy, like a whole expanded universe, if you would call it that way. So in that sense, I think the Lost Scrapbook is a much more digestible sort of product. But some people have been having trouble with the not the way it is written, but well, it is the way it is written, but not because of any weird plot or something. Yeah. But the way this novel is structured feels like a bunch of you're watching some kind of a experimental movie, and
yeah, I can see that. But I do have to say for myself that I read this book very quickly. I think if one goes into it with odd expectations for the book, it could end up poorly. But for myself, I was pretty open to it. I was just thinking, oh, well, a guy I know who has good taste recommended it, so I'll probably enjoy it. And I went in with almost no other notions of it. I knew William T. Vollmann recommended it, but I've never read a book of his. So I went into it with almost knowing nothing, and I read it in about a week, and it ended up being probably my favorite book I read that year, even though I had quite a good year. But I have heard from other people that they said they had trouble reading it. At least I think it's probably because it didn't meet what they were assuming it was going to be like. Maybe they've already read Infinite Jest, and that affected part of what they assumed it was going to be like. But I did notice on the flap here in the hardcover, it says, through the use of a prismatic storytelling form, the Lost Scrapbook finds a contemporary answer to the 19th century novel, evoking an entire world in all its richness and diversity. But by embodying the sense that we can best understand our world through witnessing the interworkings of whole communities, it is also something altogether new. The Lost Scrapbook may be the first holistic novel. Now, I don't know about the end of that, but I think the beginning can be very true as far as it seems kind of like a modern, as far as I can tell, it seems to me like a more modernist novel. And a lot of people had this experience with it. It really reminded a lot of people of William Gaddis. And for me, I couldn't believe that he hadn't read the Recognitions before writing it, because it gives so many of the same feelings of like satire of bureaucracy and focus on creativity and art, and the way the dialogue is. It's just all so similar. And I feel like it's more of a late modernist novel rather than a postmodern. But you were saying it was somewhat postmodern, right? In your opinion?
Well, to me, imagine if you were imagine seeing some radical sort of movie where there's like where every cut is a jump cut and every new scene brings up an entirely different cast of characters.
Yeah.
Felt like
there are some movies like that. Yeah.
Like which movies maybe Dara watched?
Well, one specifically, Relatos Salvajes. I mean, or Wild Stories. It came out recently in Argentina, and I thought that movie was very easy to enjoy, but it's 4 completely different stories. I'm not sure. Well, the only one I can think of that came out before The Lost Scrapbook is Koyaanisqatsi. It's, no dialogue, no plot. It's just sort of like a documentary style. But I love that movie. So maybe it's just if you like that sort of non-linear, non-chronological. I don't know. I don't know if I would compare The Lost Scrapbook to a type of movie. I mean, I can see that it's somewhat, like as that thing said, prismatic storytelling. Yeah, cinematic maybe. But really, the biggest impressions I got were from the themes of the novel, because it does not have a continuous storyline of any kind, does not have recurring characters, doesn't really even have a continuous style.
Some characters recur, like 3 or 4 of them, I think. But
yeah, sure, but I just mean that it doesn't really matter that they do. I mean, it could, but that's not the focus. For me, at least, what I gathered were the themes of the novel, and the first one that shows up is alienation or isolation. And the first scene in the novel is a teenager leaves the house that they stay at, where their mom is, and
pretending to be invisible.
Yeah, basically pretending to not exist. So they'll go home, move around an orange juice bottle, and then leave. Then when they come back, it's all fixed. They'll come home, shift around some pillows, mess them up, and then leave. And then when they come home, it's all fixed because the mom had been there. But it's almost as if they're trying to show their lack of existence by existing. And
when you first described the book to me, you brought up that very same scene, and I actually thought the whole book would be like that. I mean,
it is kind of weird that the book changes so much, because a lot of the general ideas is you try to give your reader an accurate view of the book by the first however many % of the book, but really it changes quite a lot. but alienation and isolation is a big theme. He even mentions this famous like outsider musician, Harry Partch, who invented his own instruments and used a different type of tone scale rather than the classical or even atonal. He didn't use either of them. And the second theme I would really think is creativity, because on the first page of the book, it talks about he's in some sort of weird
Stalking with some
school.
with some psychiatrist or psychologist or something.
Yeah, or like school, like career planner type person.
Then they were
along with marine acoustics and quantum biography and psychogeology, not to mention their respective subdisciplines. But what I'm not interested in, Mrs. Clipboard or Mr. Kanker or Mrs. Murmur or Call Me Carol, all of you, is your questions. Even your pointing and tipping Enoch pencils have 6 sides, my dear definers. Pay heed whereon you pinch. I am interested almost exclusively in being interested, and your reductivist probings are only intended to cordon off wings of my mansion.
That's a very acidic attack at the very concept of division of labor. When you think about it.
Yeah, very satirical. Yeah, it's really against that sort of.
You only have to do one thing all your life, and if you don't like it.
Yeah, as a human, your use, or I mean, your value is your use of yourself. Yeah, it's definitely against that.
It's also, I mean, it's against the whole corporate industrial complex a lot, because
definitely against that. Yeah, especially when you get to the end where that ecological crisis happens, and then the community it's almost like if you imagine a kaleidoscope that just starts showing you horrific images each time you turn it. Something like that, I imagine, because this normal town, starts having really weird problems related to a chemical dump by this huge corporation. But
it feels kind of like something similar happens in a segment of White Noise with the whole. I don't know if you've read it.
I haven't. No, go on though.
Well, White Noise is a similar a theme not centered around corporations that much. But
the airborne toxic event, something like that, right?
Yeah. And you know, I think the Lilo he's got a very different style to Dara. So I think Dara is more centered not so much in the event itself of a toxic leak, but rather the way these corporations, they go out of the way to create a false atmosphere of tranquility, like how they started talk patronizing to the villagers and pretend to say
like
that
they're making a big deal out of nothing.
We've been here we've been here with you, and you have to cooperate with us, and you have to.
Yeah, that's what amazes me, that this book is not popular, because these, all these academics, they're huge against this eco-criticism, all this type of garbage. They would eat this book up if they knew about it, and it's just so weird that it's not more famous. They don't even have it at my school library, and my school library has millions and millions of books. It's unbelievable.
So right at the beginning, well, not at the beginning, but in one of the earlier sections, this is seen with a tobacco company lawyer or something, and it's one of the. I thought that was one of the most Foster Wallace-like scenes, because it kind of uses the same method. I mean, it's supposed to be a question given to some person, but you only see the answer, and all the answers are always like, no, there's no correlation between cancer and smoking. There's no. I think that was. I think in that segment, Dara just he did what Wallace kind of wished he could. I mean, instead of like all these paragraphs Wallace tends to use, he just he's concise and goes to the point.
Yeah, because that is quite a big difference between 1,000 some pages and just 460 that the Lost Scrapbook is. And like I said, I haven't read Infinite Jest, but I can't imagine that it's better than the Lost Scrapbook. The Lost Scrapbook, and of course you don't have to compare them, but they were probably around the same age. Evan Dara was probably late 20s. David Foster Wallace, I think, was 33 when he published Infinite Jest, so 34 maybe.
Yeah.
So they were relatively young, writing about similar things. Both Americans, both seem highly educated. So it's, I'm sure a lot of their concerns overlapped, but it just depends on the execution and their innate personalities, how it changed.
What did you think of the middle section with the
Where it
lights?
starts to disintegrate with the radio, or like
Yeah,
that voice.
I think that was one of the most ubiquitous parts of the book.
Yeah, I mean, I loved it. It really does immerse you, and it sounds kind of it could sound silly, but because it's just the narration around like maybe 100 pages in, less than 100 pages in, it becomes broken to where it starts with an ellipsis and then it just says some words as a phrase and then an ellipsis. It's almost as if someone is holding a walkie-talkie that they have no idea the origin, and then someone speaking to you, but you can't speak back. And
the actual character holding a walkie-talkie-like device, like it had to do with this sort of the sci-fi linguistic plot.
Yeah,
about a new way to power up devices and vehicles using just the power of language. But what's most intriguing of that scene is what comes up later. The old guy in the woods that's looking for a fungi that look like some actor or something.
Yeah, that's one thing about this novel. It is funny throughout the whole book. The only part it may not be that funny is at the very end, but like even in the beginning that I read, that was a quote, that part about psychogeography and things. It's so funny, and like how he's satirizing the tobacco salesman and the guy looking for fungus in the middle of the woods after a very serious section that's like very intense. So, and then I think I'll just talk a little bit about his other two novels that came out, The Easy Chain and then Flea. Well, I haven't read Flea yet, but The Easy Chain came out, what does that make it, 13 years after The Lost Scrapbook came out? So it's quite a bit different. It focuses on one main character, but we don't really see anything from his perspective. Almost all of it is from like a view from the periphery, really. He comes up to Chicago, no one knows him, and he just absorbs power. People give him huge opportunities. He makes friends super easily. He becomes hyper wealthy, and then he just disappears, and no one knows what happens really to him. I forgot that it mentions a review that called The Lost Scrapbook the most accomplished first novel since William Gaddis, The Recognition. So it really, really does give you a lot of feelings of William Gaddis. His style of writing, he uses an M dash for dialogue rather than typical quotation marks. But yeah, this novel is very interesting because the main connection I can see between it and The Lost Scrapbook is the communal aspect of it, how stories are created by the communication of communities, and then also it's just massively creative. He comes up with so many little like mini scenes that are hilarious. Like one of the ones in The Easy Chain that I thought was just amazing was these two guys come up with an idea for a restaurant, and the idea of the restaurant is it's like a health restaurant, and you go in, and to enter they weigh you, and that's kind of like the draw to get people to come back, because if you eat at my restaurant you'll lose weight, and every time you come back you'll weigh less. So they just make it that every day they make the scale read inaccurately and make everyone seem lighter than they actually are. So even if they're not losing weight, they everyone thinks they are. So it gets really famous. Everyone keeps coming back, but then it all disintegrates. As you'd imagine, some plot like that would. But the thing that just always amazed me about this book and The Lost Scrapbook is just the massive creativity it takes to come up with all the little scenes, and it's just so much fun to read. Really, so much fun.
Well, what did you think of the section in the Lost Scrapbook involving Noam Chomsky?
Honestly, I don't remember that scene. I read the book like about a year and a half ago now, but I don't. What did you think about it?
Well, I think my bias towards Chomsky himself kind of affected my enjoyment of that scene. But you could read it. You could read it two ways. I think you could see Chomsky as some kind of you could see Chomsky as some kind of underdog of the academic world, like a sort of a satire of the whole pretext. An intellectual can become like this public figure that denounces the ills of society, but also
it is kind of weird, because I did notice that there's this talk by Chomsky where he's basically saying that school is a joke in a way because it self-selects for a particular personality, but he is like the maximal version of that type of personality, the rule follower, and deals with bullshit and just deals with it, and he does mention that he is more or less enforcing, the game enforces smirks, to quote a line from Hart Crane. But it is interesting that, like you were talking about, that fact.
Well, it's just that Chomsky's wrong in a bunch of political, ideological aspects that I'm not gonna go over right now, because I fear I might get kicked out or something.
Yeah, you'll probably get our podcast taken down even faster if you start getting into that.
Well, that was this other interpretation by a guy at a Discord chat room that basically was playing with the whole alienation theme, how Robin, the character, has isolated herself into this, had created this image of Chomsky as something that he clearly is not. Only in his saying that this whole heroization of other people can exist only in our minds or something.
So are you planning on reading his other novels? I think you bought them, right?
Yeah, I have the Easy Chain and Flea. I want to read them soon. I don't know if I'll read them after I read Gaddis, or if I'll read them right now.
Yeah, for me, the Easy Chain went really quickly, so I'd recommend that. And then Flea is his shortest novel, but I just, for one reason or another, it's not even 200 pages. Oh yeah, it is 230, but yeah, I just haven't gotten around to it for one reason or another. But it's no reflection on him, obviously. He's, in my opinion, The Lost Scrapbook is the best book that's been written since, Blood Meridian came out in 85, so since 85, it's the best book written.
Well, I would say I would put The War of the End of the World by Vargas Llosa in there as well.
Whatever. You just have a huge Peruvian bias. It's not even a bias at this point. It's just blatant.
It's not a bias. I'm not that into Llosa, but The War of the End of the World is 900 pages long, and it's actually his best novel. I think you could even say. I mean, Harold Bloom put it as part of the Western canon.
Yeah, but Harold Bloom probably doesn't even know The Lost Scrapbook existed. So What do you say about that? I mean,
Harold Bloom is not he's not gonna he's not gonna live
yeah, he's an old
any
fart.
soon.
He has like 2.5 feet in the grave at this point. I don't even know, but
You need to I don't think he's even I don't think he even makes himself read contemporary stuff anymore.
he just quotes Whitman while he's in massive pain and trying to go to sleep at night. I think we did a pretty good overview of his books, given the fact that we don't know anything about his biographical information, and
we can only speculate.
yeah. But Flea, I've read, is more of a communal novel.
Another
Apparently,
lost
this is
scrapbook.
just somewhat in a way, but I've heard it's mostly told from just different voices in a community. So it's kind of, in that way, a combination of The Lost Scrapbook and Easy Chain. So it seems like it'd be a good novel and published in 2013. It's not even 10 years old yet, so...
You mentioned the EC chain wasn't as good as the last scrapbook. Can you elaborate?
Yeah. Well, it's nothing really quality-wise. I can see that someone would like the Easy Chain more, but at least from my personal taste, the Lost Scrapbook I felt dealt with more of the things I'm thinking about now, as far as the effect of society on a individual. Really, the Easy Chain was more of a character study. It kind of analyzes a rise to fame, how fame exists, how quickly it can happen, how it may or may not have anything to do with the famous subject. It also talks about the publishing industry. There's this really funny, creative story of a lady trying to publish like a children's novel, or not a novel, but a children's book, and that's kind of a funny analysis of contemporary publishing tendencies, which Gaddis kind of makes fun of also in the Recognition. So if I had to compare it to one thing, I would say it's really in sentiment a continuation of Gaddis. I've only read Agape Agape and the Recognitions, but at least from those two, I do really get similar feelings. And I think The Lost Scrapbook is really a distillation of that tradition. It's one of my most favorite books, and I recommend it to everyone I talk to who likes reading. So hopefully this podcast will entice more people.
The thing that struck me as notable about Daisy Chain is that halfway into the book he does something similar, like a radical break in the narrative, but he does so by shoving 50 completely blank pages in the middle of the story. How is that? What purpose did that have? Do you?
Well,
can you tell us?
Of course, it has blank pages have a connotation of silence, but they also have a connotation of like a notebook, like blank pages in a notebook that are waiting to be written on. And in that way, the only book I can think of that does something similar is Tristram Shandy, The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy by Lawrence Stern. And his blank page is for the reader to basically draw a picture. So maybe Evan Dara wants us to add our own bit to The Lost Scrapbook, this communal novel chronicling different effects a community have. I'm just spitting out bullshit, really, but I mean, I think it has to be one of two things. It's either a silence and you're supposed to turn past the pages, digesting what just happened or anticipating the future, or it's meant for a creative purpose. What do you think about it?
I don't know. It could be anything. Like maybe he was just fucking around or something.
Yeah.
But speaking about community, we're I think we've got a new kind of community that's been invented in this past decades, and that is the internet community. Do you think even Dara is up to current events with the development of the internet, with the whole
Yeah, I don't
Uh,
know, because you do kind of get the sense in the Lost Scrapbook that it's kind of aiming towards that, but that's maybe one of the reasons I didn't like the Easy Chain is because I thought, oh man, the guy who wrote the Lost Scrapbook wrote a book in 2008. Surely he's talking about the internet throughout the whole book, but he almost doesn't. I mean, he mentions like emails and pagers and stuff, but he almost
this
completely
was
ignores the communicative aspect or like community building aspect of the internet, and even places like, now of course this may not be the best example of such a thing, but places like 4chan were around at the time, like chat
well,
rooms, and I think those are changing the.
they were like they were around at the time, but they hadn't blown up quite like today. I
Yeah,
think
maybe, but they were
that
still,
like
I mean, yeah, I suppose so.
when did the whole Project Chinology happen? The whole protest against Scientology.
I have no idea.
Well, but it wasn't. It was around 2010 or something.
Yeah, probably. It was probably just my expectations were wrong. I shouldn't have been expecting what I was
Well,
expecting with the Easy Chain, but
do you
I
think
don't
it
know. I
might
just
be? Do you think it might have? Uh, it might be more up to date nowadays. When was the last time he published?
2013 was Flea, so yeah, maybe his 900-page magnum opus is going to come out and it's going to be all about the internet and just totally annihilate everything that we've known about contemporary literature, which one can only hope. But as of now, I don't think there's a good representation of internet culture and literature, and maybe that's up to our generation.
Do you think we might succeed?
Anything's possible. Somebody wrote The Recognition, so if that's possible, just about anything else is. Yeah, I think this would be a good place to just say,
Wrap it up.
yeah, wrap things up. Well, I really appreciate you guys listening. If you enjoyed it, we have more episodes, and we're going to be making some in the future, so feel free to swing back by if you enjoyed it. Thanks for listening.